Hi, welcome. So today I'm going to do a really quick video showing how I use Clo3D to help me figure out the lace placement for cutting it out when I actually go to sew it up. When you need to cut out your lace, you line up the edge of the pattern piece with the low point of the lace motif. In this case, I'm using an eyelash lace, and you can see here I'm lining up the pattern piece with where I would cut it out. But what's super useful, as you can see here, is that when I line up the pattern piece, I can also see exactly how that will look on my actual garment when I sew it up. So I can take a little bit of time here and adjust the placement to exactly where I want to see it as the final garment, specifically at the center front and the outer part of this pattern piece. I kind of want the lace to flow off of a natural point. So you don't want like an abrupt edge at any of those two places. Otherwise, it won't look very aesthetically pleasing. As you can see here, it's kind of like you get this sharp edge at the inner and outer point of the lace. So, another reason why I love Clo, it just allows me to fiddle around and get that placement exactly where I want it to be, so that when I go to actually sewing my physical garment, there's no guesswork involved. I already know what the outcome will be of where I place the lace. So what's really cool about this is I can also change the placement of the lace in the 3D window. So if I use the texture editor here right in print layout mode, so here's my pattern piece laid out on the lace, I can move it around and you can see the pattern piece in the 2D window is also moving around. So now I can really refine the placement of this lace in the 3D window. So I can make sure it's nicely mirrored against this one. And then in my 2D window, I have this pattern piece placed exactly where I need to cut it out to get this 3D result. So once I'm happy with the placement of these two pattern pieces, then I can export this as a pattern. But before I do that, let me just show you another cool feature that has recently been fixed with Clo. And it's lining up these seam allowance points. So when I go to sew this cup, I'm gonna lay this piece right sides together over this piece. So I need to flip this one. And then once that's done, so these edges will line up together. Kind of like that. And now we want these seam allowances to line up nicely with each other. So now you can actually modify, before you couldn't modify the seam allowances when they were over top of each other. And I actually wrote Clo and asked them to fix this, and they have, which is cool. So now we can make these seam allowances line up nicely. So you just have to go to your seam allowance editor, go to this, and then you can try the different corners. So that lines up nicely now. And then but we still don't want this extra peak on it, so we just try the different ones and see which ones work best. So probably that one. And then what I'm going to do is send this to the back. So I'm just going to send it to the back so that I can modify this seam allowance. So you can see I'm working on this piece now. Oops. And then I'm going to modify it until I find the corner that lines up nicely. So that is close enough for me. I could try different ones if I wanted. It's still kind of fiddly, like it's not super intuitive how these line up, but those line up close enough to me, so I would leave it like that. And then so once I have my seam allowances sorted out, I go back to print layout mode and look at the pattern pieces that I am working with here. Okay, so one more trick I'll leave you with before I go on to exporting this pattern is I noticed that when I lined up this piece perfectly where I wanted it, the angles of these two pieces, these two pattern pieces were slightly different. So to make sure that I get a mirrored angle of the bottom to the top, I'm going to go back into simulation mode. And then, so I've already fixed this here, but let's say, for example, this lace was something like that. So I want this lace to mirror the angle of this lace on the left-hand side. So to get the exact mirror of that angle, I'm going to select this lace. I'm going to look at the grain direction down here. And to get the mirror of that grain direction, I need to minus 360. So I need to do 201.6 minus 360. So 158.4. Okay, so I need an angle of 158.4. So to get the exact mirror of that, I'm just going to select the other pattern piece. I'm going to put 158.4 here. And now I have the exact mirror, and then I can go back into print layout mode, check that lace. Okay, I actually don't want it on the top. So what I'm going to do is just change it by exactly 180 degrees so that I can utilize both ends of my lace. So I'm going to go back into print layout mode here, and then I'm going to put this one sort of on top to the mirror of where the bottom one is, and then I'll just refine in 3D to make sure I get the placement exactly the way I want it to be. So I'm kind of looking for this flower right here. And then I have these 3 circles. So that's the mirror of that there. And then I kind of have this line that comes out and goes down. So it's like that. So I love using precise math to do my pattern making. And that's just another little trick that I like using. Now I want to export this as a pattern, so I will go to the 2D snapshot, and this is nice because from here I usually select 1 to 1, and then I can select exactly how I want this exported. So then I can select all the lines that I want to see on the pattern. So if I didn't want pattern outlines, I could unselect those. If I didn't want seam allowances, I could unselect those. Oh, you can also change it to so I can change my seam allowances to a dashed line now, a dotted line, or a dashed line. So it's nice to have the pattern outline as a dotted line so that they're not so you know exactly where you need to cut out from. And then in this internal line, I want it to be black. So probably just a bug with Clo. I'm not sure why it's still showing as green here, even though I wanted it to be black. I also do want to have a notch on this pattern piece, so I'm going to go back and modify that on the pattern. So there we go. We've added a notch there now. So the other thing I want is my fabric texture, because I want to see exactly my lace placement for when I go to cut out this pattern piece. And then I can determine how much I want the actual opacity of the lace to show up. So I'm going to make it 50%. And then I'm going to select save. And then from here, I just select wherever I want this to be saved. And then you have different file formats. You can save it as PNG, JPEG, PDF, or DXF. So I like to save it as a PDF because that means it will export at the correct scale when I open it. So then I select save. Once that's complete, the PDF looks like this. And you can see I have my pattern piece overlaid on top of the lace motif here and here. And then what I really like about this is I can send it to my projector and line up the lace exactly where I want to cut it out. So I will quickly show you that. Okay, so I don't know how well this will show up on camera, but you can see I've projected the pattern down. It's underneath here. So you can see this line and it goes around this way. It projects around like that. It might be hard to see on the camera, but it shows up much better in real life. So then, once I have this lined up, I can cut out exactly where I need this to be. And so there's my cutout pattern piece. And there you can see it on the projector. So you just line up the lace with the pattern piece and you can cut it out exactly like that. Okay, so if that kind of thing is interesting to you, stick around because it's the kind of thing I do around here. I do intend on sewing up this bra as a actual physical garment, so stay tuned. That will be coming out sometime in the future. And if you want to know a little bit more about how to use Clo3D specifically for the development of intimate apparel, I do have a course called Clo3D Foundations for Intimate Apparel, which will get you started and give you the foundational knowledge that you need to start working with patterns in Clo3D. I'm also currently working on an advanced course where I'm going to teach how to draft and construct an underwire bra in Clo3D. I was invited this year to the Clo3D User Summit in New York where I taught this specific workflow, and so I'm bringing this into a online course to teach you how to draft a pattern in Clo3D, how to take that pattern and simulate it on the avatar, how to fit the garment on the avatar, and then how to take that and use it as an actual physical pattern which can make a garment. So if that's the kind of thing that you want to know about, get on my email list to make sure you don't miss anything. So thanks for being here today, and I'll catch you soon. Bye.